Hello, this is a little video about how to solve the squeaky front end on an SN-95 Mustang. I've had a handful of these cars and they tend to get squeaky up in the front around the power steering rack. So this will show you what you got to do to solve that problem. All right, got the car up on the lift and I've already started to loosen the first of the two bolts on the power steering rack. These have to come out. This is 18 millimeter on this side, 15 millimeter on the other side. And I've got a wrench on there and I was just using a deep socket on this side because of the length of this bolt here. And what we're going to do is replace it with these Profane, these are power steering bushings. And I'll get them out of the box. I bought these from Late Model Restoration and they look like this. And they're going to replace the older, probably cracked rubber bushings that are in there. There's bushings on both the front side right there and the back side. The front side you can get off real easily. The back side requires you to move the power steering rack out, which we'll see if I'm going to tackle that or not. It's going to require disconnecting the steering shaft up in there. I've done it before on a different car where I just replaced the front bushings with the Profane and it solved the squeak after tightening them up and greasing them. But we may do both sides. I've also done both sides before, just as a little bit more work. All right, on to the next step. You can see I got the bolt out. It's a nice long bolt. Like I said, this end here is 15 millimeter. That nut there is an 18 millimeter. And the head of the bolt is on the aft end of the car. And it slides right out through the back there. And then the next step would be to, let's see if I can do this one-handed, pry out this rubber bushing. And looks like I'm gonna need two hands for that. So I'm gonna put the camera down and pry that out. So I'm just using a screwdriver. I may get two screwdrivers to make it easier. All right. I used both hands, two screwdrivers, two flathead screwdrivers, and I just kept prying up on the edges and pulled this forward. And just gonna finish it by hand here, pulling it, and there is the front side bushing. And it's all dry, not lubed, but that's what it looks like. And incidentally, this is a 1995, it's actually a rare car. It's called a two-top convertible or convertible hardtop. So it's one of 1,000 made. It's got a hard top on it that comes off, and there's a convertible top underneath that, but kind of a neat car. This was one of my latest acquisitions, and it's got the plague that a lot of these SN-95s have with the squeaky front. We're gonna fix that. All right, on to the other side. You can see the tools I'm using, a deep socket, 18 millimeter, and I've got a flexible head. Let's see, can you see it up in there? Flexible head box style wrench ratcheting, so that'll lock that in place, and just unscrewing it from the nut end on the front of the car. All right, got something to hold the camera so you can see what I'm doing on this side. You just got to get some flathead screwdrivers underneath the bushing, and one on each side works well if you don't want to just destroy getting it out. I most likely won't ever be using these again, so it wouldn't matter. But you just work it around the edge, get it out so that you can grab it with your fingers and wiggle it out. There it is, it's out. So with the two bolts out and the front bushings out, the next step would be to remove, if I can point to it without blocking the camera, this bolt here, which connects the steering shaft to the power steering rack. But if you're just going to replace the front bushings and lube them up, tighten up the bolts, you don't have to take that out. All right, got the bolt out. It was right here on that shaft. Separate these out, and this just slip. This has an extension on it, so once it's undone, you just push that up out of the way. Gets the steering column out of the way, or steering shaft. And this is what I use to get it out. It's a 13mm bolt. I used a 1/2" socket with a universal joint to reach up there at the angle. All right, next is to try and move the power steering rack forward. All right, I used just a long flathead screwdriver, prying from behind to move the power steering rack forward to get access to the bushings that are on the backside there. Next is we'll slip these original rubber, which are dry, rubber bushings out. Bushings are out, and just pulled the power steering rack forward and twisted the bushings, as well as used a flathead screwdriver to just kind of lift up on them. This side's a little bit more challenging, but all you have to do is pull this up and out of the way. It's kind of hard for me to do it with just one hand holding the camera, but lift this up out of the way and just pull the bushing off the backside. All right, next is put some grease on the new bushings and apply them. And actually, we're going to put some grease on these shafts there. Get them good and lubed up so they don't squeak. All right, so I put some grease on that. I also put some grease inside of here because that's where your bushings are going to be rubbing, on the inside of that, both sides. I even went a little bit further and I put grease around the outside of the bushing as well as on the inside. And then this is going to go up inside of here like that. You could either put it on the shaft itself or inside here, either way would work. And then we're going to put the outside one on the outside there. Got everything greased up. The whatever that's called, the shaft, if you will, and the bushings are on both sides, front and back, all greased up. Shouldn't squeak anymore. Just gotta lift it back up, install it on there, and put the bolts and nuts back on. Stopped halfway through the step because I want to talk about, it's a little bit of a challenge getting this back onto these shafts. So do the driver's side first because you're dealing with the steering box up there. I actually used a flathead screwdriver to kind of pry it up, and then I had to move it over a little bit too to line up the hole. So and then you also have to tilt the top towards the back of the car to hook that on there, and then push and tilt the passenger side as well up into place. And then once I have two hands, I'm going to push this back onto these shafts so it sits flush back on there. Well, change of plans. So these bushings are really snug, and when I put the bushings on the backside here, due to the angle and the difficulty of the steering box over here, I could not get it to go onto the shaft. So plan B is I took the bushings back out and I installed them on the shafts themselves. This side is real easy because there's a lot of space there. This side is tight with that steering box blocking the access. So what I did is I lifted up the power steering rack and was able to get it on at an angle. And then I had a long, well here, let's see. I had big long screwdriver come down here and I pounded on it from the front side while I was holding, and I was able to drive that bushing back into place. So now we'll go back to lifting up the power steering rack and putting it on those bushings. All right, I got the power steering rack into position. I actually took out the outside bushings again, and I am going to try to hammer this into place to get the rear bushings on. There we go. Okay, hammered on the other side. And let's try this again. Line up the very tight bushing. And it's very greasy, so it's hard to hold. There we go, success. All right, the next thing I do is I apply grease up and down this bolt all the way around and maybe the first part of the threads. And then that has to get fed in from the back side. hard to see. Let's see, there it is. All greased up. Next goes your washer. And finally, your 18mm nut. If I didn't say before, I got these Prothane bushings at Late Model Restoration. And they're pretty cheap. I don't know, less than 20 bucks I think it was, whatever they were. But this will solve your squeaky front end. Got these nice and tight. And then the last step of this project is to reconnect the steering shaft. And you may have to twist it just a little bit, even though your steering column's locked. It should line up, but there's a little play in there just to get the detent. There's a little notch right there for the bolt. You gotta wiggle it back and forth and extend this onto the shaft, and I'll need both hands free to do that. Got the bolt back in. If you're having a hard time lining it up, you can wiggle your wheels a little bit back and forth, but don't get it too far off because then your steering wheel won't be centered if you go past where the last setting was. But that's it. You know, with a little bit of struggles with spacing and stuff, it's less than an hour job. It's pretty straightforward. You just got to battle little spacing issues. But that'll solve the squeak. And then, well, I can't take it for a ride right now because I've got some cars on the way, but my 2020 GT500 needs to get out of the way, and then I can take it for a ride. But that's it. That's how to solve the squeaky front end on an SN-95, which, well, it'll work probably on Foxes too, but my Foxes haven't squeaked at all. I got a 93 Fox Cobra, and that the front end hasn't been squeaking that, but I had a couple of Terminators, well, those are new edges, but same front end there. A couple of Terminators that had squeaky front ends. I got a 94 Cobra Pace over there that I redid the bottom and put new bushings. I don't remember if I put new bushings in there or just cleaned up the old ones and greased them. But yeah, now it's nice and quiet. But that's how it goes. Good luck.